Borrowed names. A story told from the inside of a life I built on other people's lives. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come, the old has gone, the new is here. 2 Corinthians 5:17. I want to tell you something that is going to be uncomfortable to hear. I was good at what I did. Not good in the way that feels like a compliment. Good in the way that means I was skilled and practiced, and I had systems, and I was careful, and for 3 years those systems worked, and the carefulness held, and the name I used on any given Tuesday was not my name, but it opened doors that were not my doors to open. I was 26 years old, and I had a laptop and a methodology and a very specific understanding of the gap between what financial institutions could detect in real time and what they couldn't. And I lived in that gap for 3 years. 41 people. I didn't count them as I was going. I only know that number because it came out in court. 41 people whose names and social security numbers and credit histories I had used as though they were tools in a drawer that belonged to me. They did not belong to me. The 41 people they belonged to came and told me so. In a federal courtroom in Nashville, Tennessee. One by one. My name is Tiffany Carroll. I am 31 years old. I am currently 11 months out of a federal facility, and I am telling you this story because it is the only way I know to repay a debt that cannot be fully repaid. Before we move forward with the story, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to help us to grow this channel to uplift more people. I want to be honest about where it started. Not to make you feel sorry for me. I have done enough damage that sympathy is not what I'm asking for, but because the truth of how something starts is part of the truth of what it becomes, and the whole truth is the only kind worth telling at this point. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, in a household that was financially precarious in the specific, grinding way that isn't dramatic enough for anyone to notice, but that shapes everything. My mother, Sandra, worked as a medical billing specialist, which is its own particular irony, given what I eventually did. And my father was absent in the physical sense from the time I was 9, and in the financial sense from before that. We were not destitute. We were the specific kind of not having that means you learn to perform having. You wear the right things and you say the right things, and you understand that the difference between the life you appear to be living and the life you are actually living is a performance that requires maintenance. I was very good at maintaining performances. I was also, by the time I was 19, furious. Furious about the gap, about the specific distance between what I watched other people have and what I had. About the way that gap seemed to have nothing to do with intelligence or effort or deserving and everything to do with starting position. I was smart. I was technologically gifted in a way that my high school computer teacher had told me my junior year was genuinely unusual. I had a full scholarship to a state university that I attended for 2 years before the scholarship's conditions required a GPA I couldn't maintain while working 30 hours a week to cover what the scholarship didn't. I left school. I got a job as an administrative assistant at a financial services company. And I had, for the first time in my life, access to a great deal of information about how the financial system actually worked. I spent 18 months learning it from the inside. I spent the following 3 years using what I had learned. I am not going to tell you the methodology in detail. Not because I'm protecting anything. I've told it all to federal investigators, and it is all in the public record. Because describing it in detail would be a how-to, and a how-to is not what this story is for. What I will tell you is how I thought about the people. The answer is that I didn't. Not really. I chose based on data points that reduced people to numbers, certain credit profiles, certain age ranges, certain geographic locations that had specific implications for how long before an anomaly would be flagged. I looked at the numbers and made decisions, and the numbers, to me, were not people. This is the thing I have to live with. Not the legal consequence, though that is serious, the interior consequence. That I looked at 41 human beings and saw numbers, that I was capable of that the capability came so easily. I told myself stories. I am a person who has always been good at stories. I told myself that the credit card companies absorbed the losses, not the individuals. I told myself that the banking system was itself a form of taking, and I was just redistributing. I told myself that I was only using what I needed and not being gratuitous about it. I was lying to myself with the specific fluency of someone who has had practice with it. The truth, which I did not let myself know until a federal courtroom forced me to, was that the 41 people were real, and I had entered their lives without permission, and the damage I left was real and lasting. I know that now. I have known it for a long time now. I want to be honest about this part too. Some of it was practical. The apartment that was nicer than anything I could afford on my salary. The car. The clothes that maintained the performance I had been performing since I was a child. The gap closing. The arriving at last at the version of life I had been watching from the outside. Some of it was less defensible. The trips, the things that had no function except to feel, briefly, like someone whose life was abundant rather than constructed. None of it filled what I was trying to fill. This is the part that makes no sense from the outside and perfect sense from the inside. I had more than I had ever had, and I was more hollow than I had ever been, because the having was not mine. Because the abundance was borrowed, in the most literal possible sense, borrowed from names I did not own, from credit I had not earned, from futures that belonged to 41 people who had done nothing to me. The things I bought could not tell the difference. I could. I knew what they were bought with, and the knowing sat in me like a stone. I did not know about the investigation until I was significantly inside it. This is how it works. Not a dramatic moment of being caught, but a slow convergence of evidence over time, a net being drawn from multiple directions simultaneously by people whose entire professional function was identifying exactly the gap I had been living in. The federal investigators had been building the case for 14 months. 14 months of documentation, of linking accounts, of the specific, patient work of demonstrating pattern across 41 instances that individually might have appeared coincidental. There was nothing coincidental about it. I found out the investigation existed on a Tuesday morning when 2 agents appeared at my door and presented a warrant with the specific, practiced calm of people who have done this before and know that calm is more effective than drama. They were right. I stood in the doorway of the apartment that was not mine in any real sense, not the way a home is yours when you have built it honestly, and felt the specific sensation of a structure collapsing, not the apartment, the architecture I had built over 3 years, the systems and the carefulness and the performances and the gap closing, all of it collapsing in one Tuesday morning. The hearing lasted 3 days. I had an attorney. I had prepared as much as a person can prepare for what was coming. I had filed things away in the compartments I had always been good at maintaining. The facts in one place, the feelings in another, the performance of composure in the place most visible to others. The compartments did not hold. because on the second day, the victim impact statements began. The first was a woman named Helen, 63 years old, who had discovered the breach of her identity when she applied for a home equity loan to pay for a medical procedure and was told she had substantial outstanding debt she had not incurred. The medical procedure had been delayed by 8 months while the dispute was resolved. She stood at the podium in the federal courtroom and described those 8 months in the specific, detailed way of someone who has been waiting a long time to say this to the person who caused it. I looked at my hands. The second was a man in his late 30s who had been denied a lease on an apartment for his family, his wife, and 2 small children because of fraudulent debt on his credit report. They had lived with his parents for 4 months during the resolution period. He did not raise his voice. He did not cry. He simply described what 4 months of that had cost in the practical, human terms of a family trying to build something. I looked at my hands. By the 5th statement, I had stopped being able to maintain the compartments. By the 8th, something I had been keeping in a very specific locked room for 3 years came out of the room. These were not numbers. They had never been numbers. They were people, specific, individual, irreplaceable people whose lives I had entered without permission and rearranged without accountability and walked away from without looking back. 41 of them. Helen with her delayed medical procedure, the man with his 2 small children and 4 months at his parents' house, and 39 others whose names and faces I now knew and could not unknow. I was sentenced to 4 years in a federal facility, restitution, and 5 years of supervised release. I deserved it. I want to be clear about that. I deserved it, and I received it, and the receiving of it was the most honest thing that had happened to me in years. Prison is not what it looks like from the outside. It is quieter than you expect in some ways and louder in others. It is more institutional than it is dangerous, which is its own particular kind of wearing down. The specific daily experience of a system that is not designed for human flourishing and makes no pretense of being so. I had time. I had more time than I had ever had in my adult life. More time than I knew what to do with, which is a specific kind of uncomfortable for someone who had always used busyness as a management tool. In the absence of busyness, in the specific institutional quiet of a place where the running stops, I met myself. Not the performance, not the gap closing, not the girl who was furious about starting positions, just me. At 30, in a federal facility with 4 years ahead of me and 41 names behind me. I didn't like what I met. This is the honest part, the part that is harder to say than the legal facts. I had understood, in an abstract way, that what I had done was wrong. I had known the word for it. I had filed that knowledge in one of the compartments and kept it from touching the day-to-day. In the quiet of the facility, the compartments dissolved. And what I found when they dissolved was not the furious, gap-closing, performance-maintaining person I had constructed. It was something much smaller and much more ashamed. My cellmate for the first 18 months was a woman named Myra. She was 52. She had been in the facility for 3 years and had 14 months remaining on a sentence for financial fraud, different from mine in specifics and similar in structure. She was from Atlanta. She had 3 adult children who visited monthly with the specific, complicated warmth of people who love someone and are angry at them and are doing the loving anyway. Myra was a Christian. Not in the way I had occasionally encountered Christianity before, as performance or cultural affiliation or the social backdrop of someone's identity. Myra was a Christian in the specific way of someone who had needed it specifically, who had come to it through the kind of circumstances that make faith not a comfort but a lifeline. She did not push it on me. She was not, I want to be clear about this because I was sensitive to it. She was not the person who knocked on your bunk every morning with a verse and an agenda. She was the person who lived a thing visibly enough that you eventually wanted to know what the thing was. I watched her for 4 months before I asked, "Myra, how are you not angry?" "About what?" "About being here. About all of it." Oh, I was angry. For a long time. She looked at me. What changed is I finally understood that the anger was keeping you company, but it wasn't keeping me warm. What's keeping you warm? Someone who knows exactly what I did and loves me anyway. She told me about Jesus. Not the Christmas and Easter version, not the performance version. The specific, documented, historically real person who had walked through the most marginalized communities of his time and had looked at people that the religious establishment had written off. The tax collector who defrauded his neighbors, the woman caught in public shame, the person everyone else walked past and had not written them off. She told me about 2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old has gone, the new is here.
She said, I want you to hear 2 things in that verse. First, if anyone, not if the person who committed the acceptable sins, not if the person who got caught doing something minor, anyone. You, me, the person down the hall. She looked at me. Second, the old has gone, past tense. Not will go eventually when you've suffered enough. Gone. The new is already here, waiting for you to step into it.
I sat with that for a long time. I don't know if I believe that applies to me. It doesn't ask you if you believe it applies to you. It says anyone. Your believing it doesn't change whether it's true. Your believing it just determines whether you receive it. I went to my bunk that night and lay in the dark and thought about 41 names. I thought about Helen and the delayed medical procedure. I thought about the man with the 2 small children. I thought about 39 others. I said out loud to the ceiling of the cell in a voice too quiet for Myra to hear. I don't know if you're there. I don't know if what she said is true, but I have done things I cannot undo, and I am someone I don't want to be anymore, and I don't know how to become someone different on my own. If you can do something with this, with me, I'm asking. I did not feel an immediate transformation. I felt in the specific quiet after the asking like something had been received. The change was not dramatic. I say that plainly because the dramatic version, the sudden, complete transformation, the overnight personality overhaul is not what happened, and the honest version is more useful to anyone who needs to hear this. What happened was incremental and non-linear and sometimes went sideways and was, at its foundation, a daily choice rather than a single event. I started attending the chapel services. The facility's chaplain was affiliated with Calvary Seventh-day Adventist Church in the city, a man named Pastor Elias Stone, who came twice a week with the specific, unhurried quality of someone who understood that transformation in this environment was a long-game project and had calibrated his patience accordingly. He did not treat us as cases. He treated us as people. This sounds like a small thing. In that environment, it was not a small thing. He preached from 2 Corinthians 5:17 one Thursday afternoon and said something I have carried since. The new creation is not a better version of the old self. It is a different thing altogether. Paul is not describing improvement, he is describing replacement. And the replacement is not something you manufacture, it is something you receive. I thought about the performances I had maintained my entire life. The gap closing, the borrowed names, the architecture of constructed identity. All of it had been a version of manufacturing a self that felt adequate. I had never considered receiving one. I had never known that was an option. 14 months before my release, I began writing letters. Not required by the court, not as part of any program, just letters to the 41 people whose names I knew from the trial record, one at a time over 14 months, not asking for forgiveness, not placing that burden on people who owed me nothing, but telling them what I knew now that I hadn't known then, that they had been people to me while I was doing it, and that I had filed that knowledge away, and that the filing away had required a daily choice, and that the daily choice had cost me something that I understand now was my own conscience, and I had spent it without meaning to. Some of the letters were not responded to. That was appropriate. Several were responded to with the specific, complicated messages of people who had been waiting to be acknowledged and were not sure what to do with the acknowledgement. 2 of the responses said they forgave me. I read those 2 responses more times than I can count. On the day of my release, Myra was still inside. She had 8 months remaining. I said goodbye to her at breakfast. She hugged me with the specific warmth of someone who has sat in a small room with you for 18 months and knows you in full and loves you anyway. The new is already here. Don't go back to the old. I won't. I meant it. I mean, it's still... 3 months after my release, I found Calvary Seventh-day Adventist Church. Not because Pastor Stone had suggested it, he had, but I would have found it anyway because the chapel services had introduced me to something I was not willing to lose on the outside. I sat in the 3rd row on my first Saturday. Pastor Stone was preaching from 2 Corinthians 5:17. He did not know I was there. He did not know I had been in his Thursday afternoon services for 2 years in a federal facility on the other side of the city. He was simply preaching the passage he had been working through for weeks. And when he read it, the old has gone, the new is here, I felt it differently than I had felt it every other time. I felt it as mine, not as information about a principle, as a personal statement about me, Tiffany Carroll, sitting in the 3rd row of a church on a Saturday morning with the full accounting of who I had been behind me and the specific, genuine, terrifying, hopeful question of who I was becoming in front of me. After the service in the fellowship hall, I found Pastor Stone. He looked at me for a moment. He said, "I know you." Thursday afternoons for 2 years. He said, "You're out." 11 months. He said, "How are you?" "I'm becoming someone. I don't know yet exactly who, but she is different from who I was." That's the work. That's exactly what it looks like. He handed me a cup of coffee. We stood in the fellowship hall and talked for 40 minutes. He did not ask me what I had done to be there. He asked me who I was becoming. That I could answer. For the first time in my life, I could answer that question from something real rather than something constructed. I put down the borrowed names. I picked up my own. 2 Corinthians 5:17 is a verse about categories. Not moral categories, not the acceptable versus the unacceptable, the minor versus the serious. The category Paul is describing is simpler, in Christ or not yet. And if in Christ, then new. The old has gone, the new is here. Tiffany Carroll's story carries truths worth naming plainly. The first is about the gap between knowing something is wrong and letting yourself know it. She understood in an abstract way throughout 3 years of what she was doing that it was wrong. She filed that understanding in a compartment and maintained the compartment with the same skill she brought to everything else. This is the specific danger of intelligence deployed in service of self-deception. The more capable you are, the more capable you are of maintaining the story that lets you keep going. The second is about the people we make into numbers. Every person whose name Tiffany used was a full, specific, irreplaceable human being with a medical procedure and a family and an apartment application and a life that she entered without permission. The reduction of people to data points in identity theft, in financial exploitation, in any system that treats people as means rather than ends is a moral failure with real human consequences. Helen existed. The man with the 2 small children existed. The acknowledgement of their existence was the beginning of Tiffany's recovery. The third is about the borrowed self. Tiffany had been constructing her identity from the outside in her entire life, performing having, closing the gap, manufacturing adequacy. The identity theft was, in a way, a literalization of what she had always been doing, inhabiting a name that wasn't fully hers, building a life from materials that belonged to someone else. The verse she received in a federal facility offered her for the first time the possibility of a self that was given rather than constructed, received rather than manufactured. And the fourth is about the letter. The 41 letters unasked for, unreciprocated in most cases, not placing forgiveness as a burden on the people who owed her nothing. The letters were not for them. They were the act of finally looking at each person as a person, of refusing at last to let them remain numbers. The old has gone, the new is here. Not when you've suffered enough, not when you've earned it. Here, now, for anyone willing to receive it. Even you. Especially you. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old has gone, the new is here. 2 Corinthians 5:17. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to be notified about more inspirational stories on redemption and hope.